I'm Natalie, 29 years old, and the day my sister left me homeless was the day she unknowingly signed her own destruction. I slept in my car while she posted selfies about peace. I watched her climb higher on the backs of lies and deceit. But I didn't scream. I didn't fight. I waited. I listened. And when the time was right, I made one move, then another, until her perfect world collapsed piece by piece, and she had no idea I was behind it all. This isn't just a revenge story. This is the story of how I took back my life, one stolen thing at a time, and how I made sure she felt everything she made me feel. I remember the exact sound my sneakers made on the pavement as I walked up the driveway, juggling takeout in one hand, humming some mindless tune, only to freeze when I saw them. 10 trash bags, one ripped open, my clothes spilling out onto the concrete like roadkill. My laptop charger dangled out of a busted purse, my favorite mug shattered in a corner of the lawn. Confused, I walked up to the front door, locked. I tried calling Vanessa. Straight to voicemail. Then it came through, her voice, syrupy cold and clipped like a customer service rep faking kindness. This was always temporary. You're not entitled to my life. That was it. No explanation. No warning. Just exile. I stood there for almost an hour, trying to make sense of it, thinking maybe it was a mistake. Maybe she'd come out laughing and say it was a sick joke. But the house stayed dark, and the neighbors peered through their blinds like I was some stray. The takeout went cold in my hand. That night, I crammed what I could into my back seat and curled up in the driver's seat, hoodie pulled over my head, heart thudding like a war drum. It wasn't just the betrayal. It was the calculation. The cruelty of pretending to help, only to discard me like trash when it no longer fit her image. And in that silence, no anger yet, no tears, something inside me cracked open. Not broken. Just different. The first night in my car felt like a blur of streetlights, stiff joints, and the constant fear that someone might knock on my window, or worse, that no one would. I found a 24-hour gym with an open lot and parked under the one flickering light, clutching a backpack to my chest like a life vest. The second night, I cried, not out of sadness, but rage so sharp it burned. By the third, I missed a shift at the cafe because I'd overslept in the heat, and by the fourth, they let me go. The smell of old takeout, the ache in my spine, the stares from strangers, it all started to blend into a sickening haze. My dignity evaporated with each "sorry, not hiring" I heard. Then on the 6th day, scrolling through my phone on borrowed Wi-Fi, I saw it, Vanessa's Instagram post, a perfect selfie, hair curled, wine in hand, captioned, "Sometimes you have to cut out the chaos for peace." Chaos. That's what she called me. The girl who folded her towels, bought her groceries, stayed out of her way. That's when something in me stopped shaking. The tears dried up. I didn't know it then, but the part of me that broke on that curb was the same part that would someday learn how to destroy, carefully, silently, and with precision. That word, chaos, it echoed louder than any insult she'd ever thrown at me, because it was so familiar, so precise, like she'd been carving it into me long before I ever slept in a car. Vanessa didn't become a monster overnight. She was built that way, brick by brick, lie by lie, with our parents handing her the blueprint. I was the sensitive one, the one who took things too personally, while she could spin a story out of thin air and be praised for her creativity. When we were kids, she'd break something and blame me, and I'd end up apologizing through tears while she watched with wide, innocent eyes. She once told our neighbors I stole from her piggy bank. I was 8, and they called me a bad influence to my mom's face. I remember begging Vanessa to clear it up, but she just smiled and said, "It's not my fault people believe me." That was the first time I realized she saw honesty not as a value, but as a weakness. I spent years trying to win her love, thinking if I was just more helpful, quieter, less me, she'd treat me like a sister. But that week in my car, reflecting on every carefully hidden cut she ever made, I realized something else. Vanessa didn't want a sister. She wanted a mirror. One that reflected only what made her shine. And the moment I needed something from her, the second I stopped orbiting her glow, she shattered me without blinking. By the 7th night, the ache in my back had dulled into background noise, but the clarity in my mind had never been sharper. I wasn't crying anymore. I wasn't hoping for a text, a call, some apology that would never come. Something in me had calcified, not bitterness exactly, but something far more dangerous, resolve. Up until then, I'd always tried to make sense of her cruelty, searching for a reason that would make it hurt less. Maybe she was stressed. Maybe I overreacted. Maybe she didn't mean it. But now, I saw it for what it was, deliberate. Vanessa didn't lose control. She took it. And in doing so, she taught me something I never knew I had, the capacity to endure without breaking. I didn't want revenge then, not exactly. What I wanted was stillness, a chance to breathe without her voice in my head. And as I sat in my car, watching the sun bleed through the windshield, a single thought surfaced, quiet and certain: she thinks she's won. That was the moment something shifted. I wasn't broken anymore. I was becoming dangerous. I didn't announce my departure. No grand declarations or parting words. Just one morning, as the city yawned into motion, I drove away, not from defeat, but from noise. Back to my hometown, a place I once swore I'd never return to. I went without telling a soul. Not even my parents, who had always kept their eyes on Vanessa's shine and barely noticed when I dulled. I crashed with an old classmate for a few weeks, sleeping on a couch that felt like a palace compared to the driver's seat of my car. I got a new phone number. Deleted old accounts. Scrubbed myself from Vanessa's digital world like I had never existed. No more likes, no responses, no breadcrumb trail she could follow. I became invisible, and it was liberating. While she posed for photos and curated captions, I slipped into the quiet, watching from a distance as she lived, unaware that the sister she discarded was slowly stitching herself back together. Not for reconciliation, but for something far more powerful. My silence wasn't surrender. It was strategy. In the stillness of obscurity, I began to breathe again. Therapy was the first step, not the surface kind that focuses on positive affirmations, but the raw, uncomfortable work that forces you to excavate years of buried hurt. My therapist didn't flinch when I described Vanessa's cruelty in clinical detail. She just nodded and said, "You're grieving a sister you never actually had." That stuck with me. I found a remote tech support job with flexible hours and enough pay to keep me afloat without being visible online. Slowly, I moved from my friend's couch into a studio apartment that smelled like old paint and freedom. I made new friends, kind people who didn't know Vanessa, didn't compare me to her, didn't shrink me. I began journaling daily, keeping notes not just of what I felt, but what I saw. I watched Vanessa's life from a distance, through public posts, tagged photos, mutual acquaintances, never liking, never interacting. She was still shining, still polished and pristine, but now I recognized the cracks. The way Josh looked increasingly distant in pictures, the fake laughter that never quite reached her eyes. I wasn't healing for her. I was healing in spite of her. And each step I took in silence made me feel less like the girl she tossed aside, and more like the woman who would one day make her regret it. It became a habit, not obsessive, just methodical. Every Sunday morning, coffee in hand, I'd scroll through Vanessa's public life like a case file, photos from brunches, reposted praise from superficial friends, and an endless stream of quotes about strength and grace that made my skin crawl. But beneath the filtered glow, I began to see the unraveling. Josh, once smiling at her side, now looked more like a cardboard cutout than a husband, present, but hollow. The captions turned from self-love mantras to passive-aggressive digs about loyalty and protecting your energy, which I knew, in Vanessa speak, meant someone was slipping through her fingers. I noticed she stopped tagging certain friends. One had unfollowed her. Another commented less. The glitter was still there, but it had dulled, and she was clinging harder than ever to the illusion. I didn't engage. I never slipped, never liked, never clicked anything that would leave a trace. I just watched, quietly cataloging the shifts, the losses, the patterns. Because every empire built on lies eventually teeters, all it takes is the right push. And I was patient. I wasn't waiting for her downfall. I was preparing to design it. It came on a Tuesday afternoon, buried between a work email and a spam ad for leggings, a message from Vanessa. Subject line, "Just checking in, 2 hearts," the kind of saccharine, surface-level crap she'd send when she wanted to feel like a good person without actually doing anything decent. My stomach clenched when I saw her name, but I didn't reply. Instead, I opened it slowly, letting every word settle like poison. It was short, polite, passive. A few lines asking how I was doing, hoping I was in a better place now, followed by a vague offer to chat sometime. I knew what it was, guilt disguised as grace. But what she didn't know, what she'd forgotten in her performative outreach, was that she sent it from her personal Gmail. And I knew that email. I knew the password habits she used, our childhood dog's name, her favorite wine, the birthday she lies about on social media. Within 15 minutes, I was inside not just her inbox, but her backup accounts. And then, her iCloud. It was like unlocking a diary she didn't know anyone could read. That was the moment everything changed. The watching was over. The building phase was done. Now, I had the keys to the kingdom she thought was untouchable. Her iCloud opened like a trapdoor into the truth, a digital graveyard of secrets that she'd buried with smug confidence, never expecting anyone to come digging. The first thing I found was her notes app, and God, did she use it like a confessional. Names, dates, half-baked schemes. There was a bullet point list titled Post-Divorce Assets Strategy, detailing how she planned to string Josh along until the deed to their house was in her name. Don't want to split equity with him. Play nice till deed is solo, she wrote, like it was just business. Then came the emails, a parade of flirty exchanges with at least 3 different men, all oblivious to each other, some married, one she mockingly referred to as Dumb Derek. She was forwarding donation receipts to herself and editing PDFs for a nonprofit she co-managed, fabricating numbers, inflating expenses, and laundering money through ghost donors on PayPal. And the group chats? Screenshots of her roasting her friends, vicious, classist, racist, even mocking one for not being able to get pregnant. She was a monster with a blowout and a ring light. And as I sat there, scrolling deeper into her curated cruelty, I realized 2 things. 1, Vanessa had built her life on lies so layered, she probably didn't know which mask she was wearing anymore. And 2, I finally had the power to peel each one off, slowly, until she was bare, exposed, and utterly ruined. I didn't rush. This wasn't about rage, this was about precision. I created folders, labeled every file with dates and context, cataloged screenshots like an archivist handling priceless relics. Each piece of evidence, an email, a note, a text, a PDF, became a brick in the structure I was building, a perfectly airtight dossier designed not to confront Vanessa, but to collapse her from within. I screen-recorded video scrolls through her message threads so she couldn't claim they were doctored. I cross-referenced her nonprofit activity with public records, downloading tax forms and linking the fabricated numbers to her emails. I even copied her notes app plans, the ones where she called Josh boring but stable and listed her exit strategy like he was a checklist item to be discarded once the paperwork was in her name. I knew I had enough to destroy her, socially, legally, financially. But I wasn't interested in a single explosion. I wanted the kind of destruction that unfolded in waves. So I backed everything up, twice. One drive in a safety deposit box, one hidden in the cloud. Then I sat back, my fingers hovering over the keyboard, and asked myself the only question that mattered now: who do I send this to first? I stared at the email draft for nearly an hour, rewriting the opening line over and over, not because I was nervous, but because I knew the gravity of what I was about to do. Josh had always been quiet, steady, almost forgettable in Vanessa's loud, curated world, but I remembered his eyes, the way they watched without reacting, like he saw everything but said nothing. So I kept it simple: you don't know me well, but I know what Vanessa's been doing behind your back. I have proof. All of it. I'm not asking you to trust me. Just read what I'm about to send you. And if you want the truth, I'll give you the rest. I attached a sample. Screenshots of the notes app with her cruel exit plan, the affair email threads, and a PDF of the fraudulent donations with dates that lined up with their joint account withdrawals. Then I hit send. No name, no sign off, just the truth. He didn't reply that day. Or the next. And for a moment, I wondered if maybe he deleted it, dismissed it as spam, or worse, shown Vanessa. But then, 3 days later, my phone lit up with an unknown number. I answered, and on the other end came silence, thick, heavy, like someone had stopped breathing. Then, finally, a voice: "Is all of this true?" I didn't flinch. "Every word," I said. That was all he needed. What came next would be surgical. After that one phone call, Josh didn't say anything else, no follow-up questions, no venting, no dramatic outbursts. He just hung up. And then? Radio silence. For 6 days. I didn't reach out again. I didn't need to. I knew that kind of quiet. It wasn't confusion or denial. It was the kind of silence that precedes deliberate movement, the way an archer steadies their breath before letting go. I imagined him combing through the folder I'd sent, opening files late at night while Vanessa scrolled through her phone beside him, oblivious to the unraveling of her world. He was smart, I could feel it in his pause. Methodical. Just like me. And in that eerie calm, while the surface of Vanessa's life remained untouched, I knew something was happening beneath it, gears turning, wires tightening, foundations beginning to crack. Vanessa probably didn't notice a thing. She was too busy curating captions about growth and gratitude, completely unaware that her husband had already begun mapping her downfall. I waited, quietly, knowing the storm was no longer mine to bring. Josh had picked up the match, and all that was left was to watch him strike. Josh didn't explode, he documented. While Vanessa floated through her filtered life, he quietly transformed from husband to investigator. He started with copies, printed bank records, cross-referenced receipts, downloaded her messages and notes app entries from the shared laptop she stupidly never bothered to password protect. He photographed the tax files for the nonprofit, highlighting inconsistencies she'd never think to cover up. Then came the financial lockdown. He opened a private bank account, funneled his direct deposits into it, froze the joint savings, and contacted a lawyer under a pseudonym to avoid tipping her off. Every move was clean, precise. Vanessa, meanwhile, bragged on social media about her relaxation era, posting wine glass selfies and spa photos while the scaffolding of her life was being quietly dismantled beneath her. Josh sent me a single text during that time, "She has no idea. Thank you." That was all. No theatrics. Just confirmation that he was moving forward. We weren't partners. We weren't allies. We were two people, broken in different ways by the same person, doing what needed to be done. And soon, she'd come home to the consequences. She thought it was a weekend of pampering, a gift to herself for surviving her stressful life, as she put it on Instagram, complete with a robe and rose petals mirror selfie. But while she soaked in scented baths and bragged about unplugging, Josh was packing. Not just a bag, everything. His documents, valuables, the sentimental things she never bothered to notice he cared about. Movers came early, swift and silent, and by the time the sun set on day one of her retreat, the house looked like no one had ever loved her there. He left nothing personal, not a single item that could tether him to her anymore. And before locking the door behind him, he placed a crisp manila envelope on the marble kitchen counter, divorce papers, notarized, stamped, and accompanied by a full report filed to the nonprofit board and the IRS. He didn't leave a note. He didn't owe her that. He just walked out of the home she thought she'd trap him in, and took her illusions with him. By the time Vanessa returned, sun-kissed and smug, she stepped into an empty house filled with silence and the slow realization that her life was no longer hers to curate. Vanessa strutted through the front door like a queen returning to her castle, phone in hand, mid-laugh from a spa selfie she'd just posted, only to stop cold in the entryway. The silence was wrong. The air different. Her heels clicked against the floor in the absence of rugs, of furniture, of life. She called for Josh once, maybe twice, before the truth began to rise, slow and suffocating. She rushed upstairs. Empty drawers. Bare closets. The safe in their bedroom, gone. She stormed into the kitchen, heart racing, and that's where she saw it, the envelope. She tore it open with shaking hands, her eyes scanning through legal filings, frozen bank statements, and a full audit summary addressed to the IRS and her nonprofit board. Panic bloomed. She dropped her phone, cracked it, and scrambled to log into their accounts, only to find passwords changed and balances zeroed. The credit cards? Declined. It took less than an hour for her empire to collapse in her manicured hands. And from miles away, I watched it all unfold, not in real time, but in pieces, through muted mutual friends and subtle social media gaps. Vanessa had always believed she was untouchable. But now? She was frozen, stripped of money, marriage, and the mask she wore like skin. If Vanessa thought losing Josh and the money was the worst of it, she hadn't yet checked her messages. While she scrambled to call lawyers and re-enter frozen accounts, her phone lit up with betrayal of a different flavor, dozens of screenshots sent to every name in her precious social circle. Josh hadn't just left, he delivered her. Forwarded group chat transcripts with her cruelest comments, mocking one friend's weight, calling another's IVF journey a desperate waste, ridiculing someone's home for smelling cheap and single. Every filtered smile she'd posted with those women crumbled under the weight of her own words. One by one, they left group chats, blocked her, unfollowed. And in the influencer space she built her identity on, that kind of exile was a death sentence. She tried to post through it, vague quotes about betrayal and jealousy, but the silence in her comment section screamed louder than hate ever could. Invitations stopped. Brand partners quietly vanished. And all those curated relationships, the clinking wine glasses, the girl gang brunches, turned to ash with a single tap of Josh's finger. It wasn't just her marriage that was over. It was Vanessa, the version she sold to the world. And now, no one was buying. The fallout wasn't loud, it was agonizingly quiet. Vanessa, once the center of endless group chats, now sat in digital silence. The notifications stopped. The likes stalled. Her texts to friends, "Call me, this is all lies, please, you know me," went unanswered, delivered but unread. She tried calling one of her oldest friends, only to be sent to voicemail. Tried another. Blocked. The women who once toasted mimosas in matching dresses at her bachelorette now ghosted her like a ghost story whispered at brunch. And as much as she tried to spin the narrative, tried to play victim, tried to claw back control, she was met only with echoes. No one was defending her. No one was there to clean up the mess. For a woman who lived to be adored, whose very currency was attention and admiration, this was death by 1,000 silences. And I watched from the shadows, not gleeful, not gloating, just steady, because this wasn't about revenge anymore. It was about truth finally having room to speak after years of being gaslit into silence. And Vanessa? She was starting to hear it. It arrived on a Wednesday morning, no return address, no note, just a thick manila envelope slid under the front door of her childhood home, where she'd quietly moved back in after her life imploded. At first, she probably thought it was legal mail, more divorce papers, maybe another bank notice. But when she opened it, what spilled into her lap was worse: printed screenshots, timelines, financial records, photos, and full-color pages of everything she'd done, laid out like an exposé. Her fake donation receipts, her notes app plots, the explicit messages to the men she swore never existed. It was all there, and at the very top was a clipping, the masthead of the local newspaper. Because I hadn't just compiled the evidence. I'd sent it anonymously to a journalist with a reputation for ripping into corrupt influencers like wolves tear through meat. This wasn't just personal now. It was public. And as Vanessa sat there, surrounded by her own paper trail of destruction, I imagined the panic set in, because for the first time, she couldn't control the narrative. She couldn't lie her way out. She couldn't charm, cry, or curate her way past what was coming. Her secrets weren't secrets anymore. They were headlines. It dropped online at 7:42 a.m., right as the city's morning coffee crowd began their daily scroll. The headline was brutal in its simplicity: local influencer accused of fraud, infidelity, and emotional exploitation, a digital double life uncovered. Within minutes, it went viral. The article didn't just hint, it showed everything. Screenshots. Timeline breakdowns. Quotes from her emails. Anonymized but unmistakably her. Comment sections lit up with fury and disgust, and the brands she once begged to notice her were now racing to cut ties. She issued a hollow statement later that day. A notes app apology that claimed she was being targeted by a jealous relative, but no one cared. People weren't just canceling Vanessa, they were dissecting her. Reddit threads exploded. Her follower count plummeted. Influencer gossip pages had a field day. She tried to go live on Instagram to control the damage, but the comments drowned her. Scammer. Liar. Karma's a BTCH. Asterisk, I didn't watch it happen in real time, I didn't need to. I saw the headlines, the screenshots, the aftermath. She had always played a character online, now she was finally being seen for who she really was. And this time, no filter could save her. The moment the exposé hit mainstream traction, Vanessa's inbox flipped from endorsements to termination letters. Brands that once fawned over her authenticity now cited ethical violations and brand safety concerns in their breakup emails. Her affiliate links stopped working. Her sponsored content was pulled mid-campaign. One high-end skincare company even publicly announced they were reviewing their influencer vetting procedures, practically spelling her name in fire. Business inquiries turned to legal warnings. The nonprofit board, likely after receiving a polite nudge from the IRS, removed her name from their site, pending a full investigation. She tried to pivot, reaching out to old contacts, but the bridges she'd burned, mocking their families, exposing their secrets, using them as props, had already collapsed behind her. Even her backup accounts, the ones she secretly used to troll or flirt, were reported and suspended one by one. She wasn't just losing relevance. She was becoming radioactive. And no matter how many filters she slapped on her desperate new posts or how long she spent rehearsing apologies, the truth echoed louder than her voice ever could. Vanessa wasn't a victim. She was a villain who finally ran out of curtains to hide behind. When Vanessa packed up what was left of her life, a few suitcases, boxes of unused PR packages, and the last fragments of her vanity, she did it quietly. No goodbye posts. No teary confessions. Just silence. Her luxury apartment, once filled with gifted furniture and ring lights, was emptied in days, leased out to someone new. She couldn't afford the rent, not with frozen accounts and pending investigations. She had no friends to crash with, no partner to lean on. So she did the one thing she once mocked me for, she moved back in with our parents. The same childhood bedroom she used to call pathetic when I lived there became her only safe space. I didn't have to ask. Word spread fast in our small hometown. She walked through those familiar doors not as a star, but as a cautionary tale. No more filters. No more fans. Just 4 plain walls, her old cheer trophies gathering dust, and the creeping realization that she had built nothing real. She had nowhere left to run, and for the first time, Vanessa was forced to sit in the stillness she had spent her whole life avoiding. I hadn't seen Vanessa in nearly 4 years, not since she dumped my belongings on the sidewalk and left me to sleep in my car like I was nothing. But the universe, poetic as ever, brought us face to face one quiet Sunday afternoon. I'd come to visit our parents, arms full of groceries, only to walk through the door and find her curled on the living room couch, unshowered, eyes hollow, wrapped in the same designer hoodie she once flaunted online. For a split second, she didn't recognize me, or maybe she did and just couldn't process the version of me standing in front of her. Clean, confident, whole. She looked small, defeated. And for the first time in our lives, she didn't say a single word. No sarcasm. No cutting remark. Just silence, and something like shame hanging in the air between us. I set the bags down and greeted our parents like it was any other day, my presence intentional, my calm unshaken. She kept her eyes down, pretending to scroll through her cracked phone. And I didn't gloat. I didn't need to. Because we both knew, without a single word exchanged, that the girl who once threw me out now had nowhere left to hide. And I wasn't the one sleeping in a car anymore. The next morning, while our parents were out running errands, she approached me in the kitchen, slow, hesitant, like she was walking barefoot over glass. I was stirring tea, calm, deliberate, when she finally broke the silence with a voice I barely recognized, low, brittle, and almost human. "What happened between us?" she said, not meeting my eyes. "It wasn't personal. It was just business. I thought you'd land on your feet." I turned to her, studying her face, the same face that once smiled as she shoved me into the street, now stripped of its confidence, clinging to rehearsed excuses like a lifeline. Just business. The phrase echoed, absurd in its cruelty. She didn't expect forgiveness, not really. This was her way of rewriting the past to make her betrayal palatable, even noble. But I didn't rage. I didn't argue. I simply smiled, cold and steady, and said, "And this?" I gestured lightly around the worn-down kitchen, the silence of a house she never imagined living in again. "Is this just business too?" Her mouth opened, then closed, nothing ready to come out. Because there was nothing left to say. She had turned my survival into a business transaction, and now, I'd returned the favor. Only difference? I never once lied about what it was. In the weeks that followed, Vanessa barely existed in the house, a ghost of herself, avoiding eye contact, offering small talk that died before it reached my ears. She no longer performed. No fake tears. No attempts to win sympathy. And while she shrank, I grew. I started telling my story, little by little, not out of spite but out of liberation, coffee with old family friends, casual conversations with our parents. They had always seen Vanessa through a lens she'd polished for years, but now they were beginning to notice the cracks. I didn't force it. I didn't need to. The truth had a way of filling the space she'd once controlled. People started reaching out, not to her, but to me. To reconnect. To apologize for believing her. And slowly, I realized I wasn't just surviving her betrayal anymore, I was reclaiming everything she tried to erase. The girl who once cried herself to sleep in the backseat of a cold car had become someone worth listening to. Vanessa used to control the story. Now, I was the one holding the pen, and I was writing it without her lies this time. While Vanessa lingered like a ghost in the background of our parents' house, I found myself finally stepping fully into a life that felt untouched by her chaos, a life of my own. Josh and I had kept things quiet, not out of secrecy, but respect. We wanted our relationship to be ours, not a spectacle. What started as shared pain had evolved into something tender and steady, the kind of love I never believed I deserved when I was sleeping in a car, abandoned and voiceless. Our connection wasn't built on spite, it was built on long conversations, honesty, and time. He had seen the worst of my sister and the best in me, and that mattered. We didn't post photos, didn't seek validation. We just were. And in that simplicity, I found peace, something Vanessa never could, no matter how many filters she layered over her life. One evening, as I sat with Josh on our porch, watching the sky shift through gold and violet, I realized this wasn't just the end of a revenge story. It was the beginning of a life no one could take from me, because this time it was real. And it was mine. We hadn't planned on her finding out the way she did, but fate, or maybe irony, had a flair for timing. It was a small engagement dinner, just a few close friends, held at a quiet restaurant in town where word, of course, travels fast. A mutual acquaintance posted a picture, nothing dramatic, just our hands intertwined, my ring catching the light. Within an hour, Vanessa saw it. I know this because later that night, she walked into our parents' kitchen like a storm trapped in a person, face pale, eyes wild, holding her phone like it had just bitten her. "You're engaged," she choked out, her voice cracking for the first time in years. Not yelling. Not scheming. Just stunned. Wrecked. I didn't flinch. I just looked at her, truly looked, and I saw not the sister who used to humiliate me, but a woman standing in the ruins of a kingdom she burned herself. "Yes," I said softly, with no malice. "To someone who deserved the truth." Her mouth opened, but nothing came out. For a moment, her mask slipped entirely, and all that was left was raw regret, not because she had lost him, but because I had won without becoming her. And in that moment, I knew, no revenge could match the power of peace she could never touch. Vanessa didn't scream, didn't plead, didn't lash out, she just disappeared into herself. After the engagement news hit her like a final slap, she locked herself in her childhood bedroom for days. Our parents tiptoed around the house, unsure of how to comfort the daughter who had built her whole identity on being untouchable. But what can you say to someone who's finally met their reflection? I imagined her sitting in front of that old vanity mirror, the one she once practiced smiles in as a teenager, dreaming of lights and applause, now staring back at a woman stripped bare. No followers. No filters. No husband. No friends. Just her and the weight of what she'd done. Maybe she replayed it all. The voicemail she left when she threw me out, the lies she told to protect her image, the choices that seemed clever at the time. Maybe for the first time, she truly saw herself. And maybe that was the real punishment, not the scandals or the public collapse, but the unbearable silence of a mirror that finally stopped lying. As Vanessa stayed hidden behind the door of our childhood bedroom, I stepped fully into the life I'd spent years rebuilding, not from the ashes of what she destroyed, but from the foundation I had quietly laid in her absence. There was no more need to prove anything. The pain she caused no longer dictated my choices. My engagement to Josh wasn't a power play, it was a beginning built on truth, healing, and love that had nothing to do with her. I got promoted at work. We started house hunting. I visited my parents less often, not out of avoidance, but because I no longer needed proximity to the past to feel grounded. Vanessa's name became just that, a name, not a wound. She'd lost everything, not because I took it from her, but because she was too consumed with winning to realize no one was playing her game. And as for me? I woke up each day with a clean slate, no ghosts, no shame, no scripts to follow. Just the quiet, powerful joy of knowing that I hadn't just survived her story. I had rewritten my own. It happened on a quiet morning, sunlight filtering through the windows of the new home Josh and I had just moved into. I was unpacking a box labeled old stuff when I found it, a dusty folder of childhood photos, a couple of letters Vanessa had written me back when we were still pretending we were sisters instead of rivals. I sat with it for a long moment, not out of longing, but reflection. There was no hatred left, only the faint outline of a girl I used to trust, and the reality of the woman she had become. I didn't cry. I didn't hesitate. I walked outside, lit a match, and watched the pages burn in a small fireproof pit we kept for chilly nights. It wasn't dramatic. It wasn't about revenge. It was about release. No more revisiting her page. No more reading between the lines of her silence. I blocked her number, archived the emails, and told our parents not to update me unless it was urgent. That was the final cut, not cruel, just clean. Vanessa was no longer a villain in my story. She was just a closed chapter in a book I no longer needed to reread. Sitting on the back porch of our new home, legs curled beneath me, Josh inside humming as he made coffee, I let the silence settle around me like a warm blanket, not the silence of absence, but of arrival. The chaos had passed. The pain had been survived. And for the first time, the story I was living didn't revolve around someone else's damage. It was mine, gentle, steady, and earned. Sometimes, I still remembered that night on the sidewalk, staring at my life stuffed into trash bags while her voicemail played like a dagger. I remembered the hunger, the humiliation, the loneliness that clung to me like frost. But I also remembered the fire it lit inside me, not to destroy her, but to rebuild me. And now, with a ring on my finger, peace in my chest, and love beside me that required no manipulation, I knew, it had all been worth it. Every second I spent alone. Every tear. Every move I made in silence while she boasted online. Not because I won, but because I survived without becoming her. And that was the real victory. That was the life she could never steal.